started there? You go to get started? Okay. Go ahead and call this meeting to order, 8:02. Thank you all for coming. And in terms of the agenda, there's a couple of requests, one from me and one from Ken. Ken requested under new business if we could add a Spark update. And then I would like to add an item for DDA events. Any other additions or questions on the agenda? I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
All support. Okay, James and Pat, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Public comments on agenda items? Anybody? You guys around later? Moving on. Moving to the minutes from our July meeting. Any discussion on the minutes? Or I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Motion by Thad. Support. Support by Ken. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Financials from June and July. Kelly included the July ones in the packet that did not get emailed out in time. I guess let's go through June first. And
They're up here. I don't need them.
I did not correct it. I think there were additions.
yeah, sorry. Thank you. Cameron, do you have anything for June financials that you want to? Cameron's been working with Sheila at West Shore Bank and Connie, our CPA.
Yeah, there were a couple of things I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. So I met with Sheila at West Shore yesterday, and we have essentially kind of consolidated the accounts that were existing for DDA dollars. So we have left now one account where all the other, I think it was one from 2018, one from 2019, those were closed. And everything was consolidated into the one account. The second item, if I can get everyone.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So have the procedures been updated to reflect that change in the account structure? So there's a reason that each of those accounts existed. Is there procedures put in place for
No, not Sheila. Not Sheila. I'm sorry, not Sheila.
And then the other item about that, something in the minutes that I could take to Sheila that we're in agreement on. There was a deposit made to, it was split out, it was from the city of Manistee, and the deposit was made to keep the lights on account, half of it, and then to the other half was deposited into the general fund account. Well, Karen wasn't aware that keep the lights on was something that had been created by the Business Development Committee, and Caitlin had just opened that account, and it shouldn't have had anything deposited other than contributions to perhaps help people in the downtown area. So I need approval to move those monies to the general fund.
Keep the lights on. In my head was bills. You know, keep lights going. So keep bills. So I didn't know which one to put in, so I split it apart. The thing about that account though
Yeah, and that's the other, so the second part of that is to just close that account because nothing has been established with it. There was supposed to have been from, I think Catherine Kenny, who sits on the business development committee. There apparently was a donor, somebody donating money to make a contribution to, if somebody was in need downtown, you could submit a request to receive the funding, like in an amount of 500 or less, and the account was never funded, so I don't know why we had it.
Yeah, we're being penalized.
So essentially, it was an open account with a zero balance.
Right.
Okay.
And potentially a negative balance if we let it continue.
I don't see any problem closing it either.
I'll make that motion to close the account.
I guess I'd be, since we created that account, I think in April or May, I think we should at least understand what the motion was that created it so that we're properly closing.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. Do you?
No,
Yeah, I mean, the business development committee came to the board and basically said there's interest in people donating money to support downtown businesses. We need a place for that money to go, and then a program as to how to distribute it. So that committee was going to create and administer that program. This account was where those funds would be, so they wouldn't be intermingled with other funds. That committee, I don't think has met since
No,
that
I'm
time.
on that committee, and we have not.
And therefore, that program really never got kicked off.
I guess, why can't we just put it in the general fund and have a line item for that? In my mind, much easier to administer.
Yeah.
I don't know the understanding of the why at that time. that was
Yes.
decided.
It just makes sense to me is run everything under a general fund.
Can
And just have a separate line item.
Can I suggest that we put a sub-bank account in the accounting system with that title, just in case it is funded, but that we, per that motion to close the account?
Right.
Okay. Bruce, did you second that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second.
And then, could I also have approval to transfer those funds from the account
Let's,
in the minutes? From the city?
I'll amend my motion to close the account, and if there's any funds, transfer them to the general fund, and create a line item.
But, okay, my understanding though is that there are no funds were ever designated for that purpose. And that accidentally funds got put in that account incorrectly. So I don't think we want to transfer those funds into a line item that still says keep the lights on, because that's not where they should go.
Well, we can transfer it there and then make a budget, and then it'll be a time to move it to another line item. Doesn't matter. Where we're gonna put it now?
It should just be general
General
fund.
fund.
Yeah, just general fund, I thought.
Oh, I thought you in your motion, I was able to say transfer the funds to the general fund.
That's
all
fine.
I like that.
okay,
Thanks for that notation.
And then you're just saying, though, to just create a line item under the general fund for the keep the lights on.
Exactly.
a fund. Good with that, Bruce? All right. Thanks for the clarification. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. So that was financials from June. Anything for July? What's that?
I have comments on June.
Oh, okay, I thought we were done. Sorry.
I was going back and an email that Caitlin had sent out at the end of May, one of her last emails. There were a couple to-do items as it related to the financials. Specifically, one of the things that was supposed to happen before the end of the year was the transfer into our, what's the name of the account now, our property acquisition account of the allocated money for the year. It's going to be year-end transfer that should happen, and it didn't happen. And the other was the transfer out from the facade grant into the general fund, because those monies had been expended. And those two changes never got done.
Yeah, the facade, the money that Sheila mentioned that yesterday, those funds from the facade grant, it sounded like at one time it was going to be transferred out, but then Caitlin was saying that it needed to, I don't know, stay here to replace something. I don't understand.
Just, somebody needs to, follow what board action, I don't know who that person's gonna be, whether it's Cameron, Connie, whomever, but that's the checker, we just gotta make sure that.
And my question is, since that's last fiscal year now, can we at this point do that, or is it too late? I know often during audit, things get done that get reflected, backdated to the end of the year. I just don't know if these things are reflected to that or not.
So the second one, the transfer is just an easy transfer from this Manistee DDA, whatever, ventures into the business ventures. That's just a transfer. You can't date it. That was from last fiscal year.
I think that's, well, I don't think it's a problem either, if you want clarification, then I would just ask Connie, what's the deadline for accrual?
Cameron, can you ask Connie if we can do that retroactive?
Yes, and is that, you said the DDA venture into what?
It is the business venture CIPF, you want the number?
Yes.
2005
Uh-huh.
4268 to the main account,
Okay.
business venture CIPF, which is 2003-3923.
And what is,
And that's for the $5,000.
thank
Yes.
you, that's what I was gonna, what was the amount? All right. And then we can just ask Connie about the deadline on it, making it for the,
But then the other one would be the transfer of the $25,000.
Which I thought we had a discussion on, that. I thought we did.
That was for land acquisition.
Yeah. 25,000.
So they're really not accruals, they're just transfers, so it's not the expenses you had that fiscal year.
Right.
So it's just, so it's a little bit different situation, I think we should be able to just transfer. But I would get Connie's.
so can we say that if Connie says it's okay, because then I don't have to get, I don't have to be there and try and call Kyle and, we can just say that if Connie says that there's no issues with it, in terms of the accounting being transferred, are we in agreement that
I'll make it as a motion
okay.
that we authorize our treasurer to work with our accountant, pending the accountant's agreement and timing of this, that we authorize the transfer of $5,000 from the account that
Yeah,
Karen
I
had
know.
listed before,
Okay,
and also the $25,000 from the general fund into the property acquisition fund, as was reflected in last year's fiscal budget.
Got that, Kelly?
no, I'm gonna get you. Property acquisition.
Refer to the table.
Yes, I've been.
So we have a motion.
I'll support.
Thanks, Matt. Motion and support. Any further discussion on this?
Cameron, I just forwarded you this email with the numbers off.
Thank you.
I don't believe we need a roll call for this. It's not expenditure, it's just transfer, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Anything else on June financials? Moving to July? Amber, do you have anything for July?
The only thing I did while I was Sean that went to a designated account that Connie told me, and then there was $50 from Taco Wallet. That went to another account.
Was that an outdoor seating permit?
I don't think so, yes, yes.
Any questions for Cameron?
Is it, how, beyond the general fund, how many other separate accounts do we have?
Oh, I didn't ask the number, but I'm certainly happy to find out how many accounts there are.
Yeah, so, you know, I would like to see us work towards having just a general account, and then everything else will go in there with this, because I think it gets too confusing with all these different accounts. Personal opinion on how everybody else feels.
I agree. I know there has been some discussion with the chamber as well in regards to that.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because whoever comes into the chamber is going to be confusing.
I mean, I guess my concern is those accounts were created to solve other problems. So as long as we go back to understanding what problems they were trying to solve, so that we're not recreating problems that we used to have when we created those accounts, I'm fine with it. It's just the means of trying to keep things straight, because we were losing track of funds where they were. So this was a way of forcing us to.
I can ask Connie. Would that be?
Connie doesn't even have that history.
Oh,
But I think
It
that-
really, in the last transition, when we were, our previous accountants, the basically just.
That was the situation, yeah. So I think that having the budget, and then we agreed to a line item budget in which we have these items specified. I think
Right,
will be
but
easier.
part of the challenge is, especially as it relates to the land acquisition and the facade, is when the authorizations come in a budget year, but the expenses often are in different fiscal years. That was the reason we had these accounts outside the general fund, to basically hold those monies across multiple years.
You can do that in a line.
Yeah, you can do that all
It's just,
right.
again, the way the reporting, those monies just poofed at the end of the year, and then when the expenses came, it's like, well, now there's no money for that.
Well, you know, it's unfortunate we had to do that based on poor accounting. So if we have somebody, you know, very competent,
And again, that just, my concern is that we don't recreate the problem.
No, I appreciate the history, because I kept wondering myself, so, thank you. Anything else for July? Yeah, thanks for your work on that.
Thanks.
Committee reports, design committee had to postpone this week.
do we need an approval on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we do, for July financials,
Is
apologize.
there one out there? I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, thanks, Ted.
I'll support.
Thanks, Barry. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again. Barry, do you have anything for design?
No, I mean, other than the banners finally got up downtown, those last week, thanks to Jeff and Debbie for doing that for us.
Great. I know there's a lot to talk about it next week.
There will. Feel free to enter 6 months of money.
Yeah, feel free to join anybody.
And unfortunately, we'll need it.
Yeah. Maybe speaker will. Old business, just a quick update on the DDA, Manistee Chamber of Commerce agreement. City Attorney George Saylor looked at our proposed agreement and rewrote it in his language with no changes. So I sent that to the chamber. They have their meeting tomorrow, and I'm looking to approve that. I have a meeting on Friday with the chamber president and Dennis McCarthy and Stacy and Mark Miller, just to kind of have some preliminary discussions about, they just have questions about our committee structure from the past and that sort of thing. So kind of an informal conversation in regards to, you know, some history I may or may not be able to provide. kind of hopefully build a roadmap how we're gonna integrate this, assuming that the chamber approves the agreement also.
So since the agreement was, as you said, rewritten in legal terms, do we need to reapprove that as a board since the language we approved is not current language?
I didn't think so, because I felt like at the last meeting, there was a motion that gave me authority to do that. But
I think maybe a better choice of words of rewritten was.
I just used his words, and I
Sorry.
knew that probably
No, that's
wasn't
fine.
the
No,
right
I would
words.
turn, I took a look at it because we are gonna have that in front of the council next Tuesday for their approval. And I looked at it, it was just more formatting than, new words.
I guess just to make me feel better, I'll make a motion that we approve the adjusted contract for lawyers' comments or feedback, given that it has the same terms and conditions as what we approved last time.
great.
I'll support that.
Do I hear that? Yeah. Okay. Can't see mouth moving. Sorry. Any further discussion?
Just, that this will go in front of council next Tuesday for their approval because statute requires that they approve the executive direction. So there shouldn't be any issue.
Thanks for that addition. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Update on lower story dwellings and DDA support, Mexico, assistant planner. I see Ron Carson is here as well. Several months ago, we had a presentation from Mike and Kyle's story. And just, there's been some board turnovers at times, so I asked Mike if he would come and sort of re-present the proposal. If you want to use the mic up here, that'd be great. Thanks for coming, Barry.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right, so I got your email from Kyle, just basically asking me a couple questions. Went back and looked at what you guys had requested, actually. So you guys had thought you had taken care of this with multiple story dwellings as a dwelling multiple unit under special use within the C3 district. The problem became, if you actually look at the definition that was implemented, it says a building which is a dwelling designed for and occupied by 3 or more families with separate housekeeping, cooking, bathroom facilities for each. Here's the problem. How many places down in the downtown can support 3 or more families with separate cooking, cleaning, all that stuff? So we had an individual come to us and basically request that we look at lower story dwellings within the downtown. You guys had a 20 feet minimum requirement on there that basically said the first 20 feet has to be commercial. We looked at that and we matched in with a May 2nd, 2019 Claire Carter from Housing, our Manistee project Rising Town, back-end rater, basically had made some requests for you guys for upper story dwellings. One of them was to expand it not just to the C3 district, but to the C2. There's other requirements in here for other residential ADU regulations that consider letting these be permitted uses in every residential district. With those requests, what we did was we put together a lower story dwelling one that kind of matched your existing upper story, leaving that 20 feet in, but allowing for a 500 foot, and the question had become, why the 500 feet? Well, it's a minimum amount of square footage that you need currently within the ordinance to put in a dwelling. So we just stuck with that because we know it's supported by the master plan, and we're trying to get an amendment passed, so we don't want a lot of turmoil on it. With that, we developed language, had the attorney look it over. He's agreed with it. We pass it on to you guys to kind of get an approval on it. And that's kind of why I'm here, so. Did I answer all the questions?
I've got follow-up questions. So is this the totality of the changes? So is all of this that's presented changing? Is everything else is changing? I guess I'm trying to understand what the differences are between the existing ordinance and what we're being asked to approve. And
Okay.
I mean, last month we had a one-page sheet as part of our packet that just listed out a few things. I didn't know if this was a
Okay,
set of
so-
changes or if this is, I'm just trying to understand what we're being asked to support.
Okay. It's essentially what you guys had, I think, when Kyle came forth last time, you guys had thought you'd already passed this amendment. And I wanted to bring forth an amendment basically that allows for the lower storing as well as the upper story, per some requests from some business owners downtown. What you're really essentially saying is exactly what's on that sheet I gave you last time, just that within the C3 district. We didn't expand it out, we didn't push it further than we needed to. We had requests in, that's what you have is what we're requesting. Now, we don't have to come forth and seek, support. We chose to do so. We'd like to have a better working relationship with you guys. But really, we'd like to get this passed sooner than later. So just letting you guys know, we are moving forward with this. We're going to call a public hearing where we'll accept your comments at that point in time. Unless you guys feel the need to approve it now. And that's why I'm also here, is hopefully to get that approval. But there's a certain individual that has been waiting over a year for this. And because it wasn't a formal amendment request, it kind of got pushed to the back burner, but we still wanted to pass and be able to pass something. If we make it too complex, the public could come out against it and say, hey, we don't support this, and then that individual's kind of out of luck. What we did was we tried to mirror it with what was existing, and then to allow for flexibility with what was advised to us by Claire Carner and Manistee Rising Tide. So we tried to match those up and just kind of say, hey, if we incorporate some of what they're requesting along with the amendment, it's kind of a good thing for all of us, but then revisit this letter later from Claire and try to implement some of the other things. Right now, we're currently not trying to do that. We're trying to help out somebody who financially needs some help. By passing this amendment, it would open up some resources for them. So that's kind of why and then we wanted to also at that same time have a better relationship with you guys. Because we know in the past that hasn't been taking place. But we don't want to hold up any kind of like development or any other things with just essentially which is a recommendation. So we would like to move faster through these processes if possible, and I know that you guys have had a lot of changeover and there are questions, and maybe some of these could have got ironed out if you guys would have had a director or somebody in place at that time, but I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just trying to
You don't need our approval, you're gonna move forward with this?
well, we're gonna allow you guys to comment during public comment.
So you're not asking for approval from the board, you're just telling us that you're gonna move forward?
Right.
What are we commenting on?
Well, we still want you to comment on it. It's just, we've been holding it up for, I think, 3 or 4 months now. And I wanted to call there's other amendments that are waiting for this public hearing that are not included in this. There are other amendments for like storage structures and such like that elsewhere in the city. But we'd like to call them all at one time to knock it out. And we've been waiting to call that meeting, waiting for this approval. Or support, really. It's support. Not approval, support.
Can I ask a question, Mike?
Yeah.
Item C says no dwelling unit shall exceed a maximum of 2 bedrooms. Why? Is that just for second story?
It's just for lower story.
Lower story?
Yeah. It's gonna be hard to get more than 2 bedrooms in there, guys, at 500 square foot.
In where?
In the C3 district.
But-
I mean, elsewhere, it might be, like, there's houses out there, but a lot of those houses could also come in under like a duplex or something else like that.
But
It's-
500 square foot is the minimum.
Right.
So what if you've got 3,000 square foot, why would you still limit it to 2 bedrooms?
Well, I mean, they could come forward and request a variance or something else like that. These are general guidelines as well. Like, I'm not trying to write something to appease everything. It's not a one size fits all. This is the best for this situation. There's not too many, I mean, how many 1,000, 2,000 square foot plus buildings are there downtown on the first floor?
A lot.
A lot.
But that are just purely non-commercial use.
Well, I don't think it matters if it's a commercial use or not. I just, why limit the bedrooms if you've got a 3,000 square foot building? You dedicate the minimum first 20 foot of depth to commercial use. Beyond that, why say you can only have 2 bedrooms after that?
We can, if that's something that you guys would like, we can put in a public comment and then address it. I just, we basically looked at the downtown and the surrounding areas, and there's not, I mean, you have 20 feet, so you have 400 square feet of commercial use, basically, if it's 20 by 20, and then you have 1,000 on top of that, so we're looking at that basically and saying, okay, but if you don't want us to limit it, we can adjust.
Well, I think the 500 square foot limits it, they're, what's that?
They said minimum.
Yeah, the minimum 500, so that just, it might not be needed, to say 2 bedrooms.
I guess what is the reason it's there? What are you trying to limit by recommending against 3 bedroom? If there's the space, why, generally you don't add things unless there's a reason they're there.
My recommendation, instead of turning into a boarding house, we put in small bedrooms and we have a dozen people living in a space.
I think the building code would probably.
I don't know.
Building code doesn't do anything for short-term rentals. So you do run into an aspect where you don't want these things. Actually, the rising tide basically says one of the requirements for lower story dwellings is to make the property owner live there. We didn't include that.
Well, I don't know if you're going to build a space, it has nothing to do with what the space is intended for long-term or short-term or owner living there. I think if you're going to build a space, you would go through the building inspector and, build it as required. So I think they're 2 different things. Yeah.
So I come at this from the rising tide recommendations, which I thought were excellent. And between the time that those were published and now, I don't know any of the history. So, the rising tide recommendations were put in place, housing north rising tide recommendations. We're there to solve a number of problems in this housing market. So if you approach us and say, we support, these 2 amendments, I personally say, yeah, that's terrific. If you approach me and say you're working towards implementing the recommendations, which are based on best practices across the country, I wildly support it. Okay, just personally. So, just so you know, the frame of reference for one perspective.
I appreciate that. I think that it's also not just like implementing these amendments, but also getting them through a public hearing. So we have to work with what's supported by our current ordinance as well. I'm not trying to say, hey, we don't want to implement these, because these are all very good requirements that they put in here. the problem is getting support from other entities, as well as the support of the planning commission and then eventually the public. So, I'm not saying, we should minimize or anything like that. A lot of these were taken, right out of here and then mixed in with the lower use. The two might have been a conversation that was had at the planning commission that I'm not recalling. But currently there's nothing that allows them. So I'm like, can we pass something and help out this individual while also trying to implement some of these best practices? That's really what I'm trying to do. But I don't want it held up if, come back, month after month and provide more information. A lot of these were implemented prior, or even this recommendation from Claire, from Becca and Rader came out on May 2nd, was prior to my time here. They weren't being actively worked into anything. So I am trying to work these in. I am looking for support, but I can't be going month after month after month is all I'm saying. And saying, hey, here's information you've already looked at, or should have, or, this is why I'm doing it, but I need to be realistic as well.
So, I was just going to interject, do we have any issues beyond the maximum number of bedrooms?
I've got another question. So in the definition of lower story, especially on the river side of the street, where the lower story on the river side is a different story than the lower story on the street side, it just seems that this is vague as to which of those count as lower story. I hope both would, but I don't see, I could see it being vague and therefore open to interpretation as to what the definition of lower story is in that situation.
So you're saying like a walkout basement into a courtyard?
My building,
Okay.
exactly, I've got a walkout basement that's got a deck. The first story is 10 feet higher than that, but on River Street, it's the opposite, it's a basement and a first story. So does that lowest level on the Riverwalk side, would that fall under this, or would that not be allowed?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, I think this is the lower story dwellings kind of made for the commercial side. However, it could be applied to that other one. I mean, I don't know how big your building is, Barry. If, do you think you'd have two 500 square foot residences within that? With 400 square feet of commercial space on the front end?
I guess, I'm not sure where the two units come from.
Lower level dwellings, and the 2 bedrooms, so.
I mean, would it be easier looking at it at street level?
I mean, it's basically, I see where Barry's going is an interpretation, but,
Because one of the reasons I bring this up is I actually am thinking about adding residential units on that basement level with that private Riverwalk entrance and not changing
the younger,
commercial level.
would you exceed 1,000 square foot with 2 bedrooms? That's the way I look at it, like, okay, you're keeping the commercial, you're allowed 2 lower story dwellings that would qualify. Now, if you, and we can look at the bedrooms, because then it kind of solves that as well. If we just remove the limit, then if you wanted to have 400 square foot of commercial space with a back bedroom too, and you had a room, you could do that as well. I mean, a lot of these buildings that you guys have are not, they're not cookie cutter. So, this is, part of the reason we wanted to come and bring this to you guys is, for collections like that. But, from what I'm hearing, is removing the maximum number of bedrooms seems to be a good idea.
And I would just say on the maximum number of bedrooms, would it solve the issue if we just said, no dwelling unit meeting the minimum floor area of 500 square feet shall exceed a maximum of 2 bedrooms. Then you're saying, if you're only at the minimum, you can't cram more than 2 bedrooms in there. But if it exceeds that, then it's open to additional bedrooms if we need to. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward way to approach it. Still gives authority to grant waivers if the space is larger.
I like that trade.
And I think, I agree, but I also like, if the intention is to retain commercial space on River Street level, River Street in this circumstance, maybe just changing that terminology to street level, because lower level can be a little bit confusing. I have same situations buried in 3 buildings where
But actually, that is the language in here for that description.
for street level.
G is 20 feet down at street level,
Okay.
but the definition of lower level
That's what's,
doesn't
I mean,
talk about basement.
to be perfectly honest, it sounds like I should open it up further than just I'd like to keep the commercial level 20 feet, and just maybe change the definition a little bit to where, lower story dwelling, or, it's a little bit of an interpretation here, I'd like to keep it clean, but, if you have sub-level, then that can be, I can write a comment in here basically to say, sub-level can be also like, I don't care about the first 20 feet, I'm keeping G, because I want to keep that commercial space, but you can, sub-levels included in lower story dwelling, and then we modify the maximum number of bedrooms to say, hey, 500 square foot, minimum, and then you can have, 3 or 4 if you need to.
and sub refers to sub from street level.
Yes, from street level.
Okay, just to be clear, okay.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Not trying to beat it to death, but.
no, you're fine, I mean,
I think there's a couple of things. I hear very clearly that you've been sitting on this and want to assist and get some things rolling. I think that's fine. However, I think that I hear a lot of, we can interpret it that way, we can look at it that way. And I think that these are important conversations because the mess we're in is because people wrote it loose enough that interpretations change. You might not be here in 10 years, so now want somebody else interpreting. So that is a concern. And that's how people on River Street have been able to get away with some of the stuff they're doing for 20 years without.
Or prevented from doing things that seem logical, but
Right.
interpretation is not allowed.
Yeah, so these refinements, I think, are okay to add in there, and I think it'll make it a lot clearer. But I also understand that we've got to hold this through.
Mike, would it work if you were able to, make those changes as suggested here, and then some kind of a note that you address the DDA board, and these were the issues, and you incorporated those in, so you could meet your sense of urgency to get it taken care of?
yeah, so if, the planning commission really is requesting to move forward with it. But what I can do, and this is what I would have done if you guys would have just came back with public comment, is incorporate it into the written language. It wasn't like you guys were going to be left out. It was simply incorporating what you guys have requested into the amendment. I don't think anything that you guys have requested is outrageous. And it kind of fits right with it. We're just kind of brought it to you to try to get some of these things ironed out a little bit quicker, but I realized with everything going on that wasn't possible. And we would have incorporated it. So, we would have just said, hey, public comment, okay, this is what the DDA says. Hey, these are good ideas, let's put them into our amendment, send it over to George, and George will review it again. We've already had one look at it. A couple of things have changed a little bit from what you guys have looked at. But it's mainly just language where it's like on or after. It's not too extreme. What we'll do is I don't think there's going to be a meeting call because with the amount of amendments coming through, we'd have to find another venue to do it, and I'm not looking to burn up the Ramsdale. for the city council. So until this gets lifted, we can consider it a work in progress, but as soon as it's lifted, I wanna call that meeting. And that's why we're moving forward with it. But with what you guys have said today, I think everything's reasonable and it should be included. It helps not only the business owners, which is you guys out, but hopefully we can get some people downtown. And I know that you guys have a general interest in short-term rentals. We are developing the policy for the city now. I encourage you to participate in that, because you guys seem like you have more of a to gain or lose on that. So.
We have one final comment or question in regards to this, and how it relates to the Historic District Commission. Because sometimes somebody will come with a plan and the Historic District can look at what the original use of that building was. You know, for example, if it was a service center downtown and there were overhead doors in it. And that, from a historic standpoint, would be historically accurate if somebody wanted to bring that back. But I don't know if that has come into play with this thought process at all.
With Lower Spiritual?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of it, I mean, with the historic district, I mean, granted, they like to have the original historic buildings within downtown. But, you know, some of that's a negotiation when you go to them. You can sit there and say, hey, I'm willing to do this, I'm not willing to do that. Do you want this building, you know, renovated? Do you want it updated? And, you know, obviously the answer is yes, but it's a give and take. So I've dealt with other historic districts, like I designed a building in Fort Bragg when I was a soldier there. And basically, you know, everything was a negotiation. Like you can sit there and walk in there and say, hey, I'm willing to put this original on here. I'm not willing to do that. And they got the right to say no.
I guess I'm just looking at the use of the space though. If somebody wants to put in, for example, an overhead door, does that front 20 feet need to be considered commercial, or can it be part of residential because there's an overhead door there? I mean, there's a property like that downtown now, or is this going to be something where you have to go and negotiate, or is it?
Well, I mean, when
does historic district, because we're a federal historic district, does that supersede this?
No, it's kind of a, no. So the zoning in place, like what you're talking about are kind of two different things. Like the zoning basically classifies like what you can do there, you know, use-wise and stuff like that. But what you're requesting is, hey, if I want to put a door here, a service door, I don't know, for a garage I'm taking it, and you want to say, hey, that's part of the residential, as long as you're meeting the other requirements of that, and it's historically accurate, I see them granting something like that, as well as us saying, yeah, you know, that makes sense. You met the other requirements of the zoning ordinance. That's the historical district has said, yay, go ahead. The other thing you got to realize is with a lot of these land use things, well, all of them in the historic district, if they're not signing off on it, we're probably not issuing out a permit. So
it would come to the historic district first.
I mean, all of them have to. You have to get the certificate of appropriateness and then move forward. Now, one thing is, you know, I work for the historic district, so I'm going to look at it from a zoning aspect and probably tell you up front, like, hey, where's your 20 feet, you know, like of residential or commercial, and then, you know, before you bring it forward and say, you know, just not to waste your own time. You know, like, these are things that I look at kind of at the same time as this, and we'll send it over to Mark and say, hey, Mark, what do you think on this? So, but if you're meeting the requirements of the zoning and they find it historical accurate, yeah, it's going to go right there.
Just one last thing, like, when you modify this, just, if you want, just send it to me, and I'll push it out to the DDA.
Okay. All right, so yeah, what I'll do is I'll take back your recommendations and I'm just gonna make sure I got them right, because I'm gonna review the tape actually, so.
What I want, if I could, I just want to say thank you. And I know we don't have a formal role in this process. I really appreciate you reaching out, spending this time, explaining these things, because as was said earlier,
fundamentally, we all agree that these are necessary things. There's no disagreement of the importance of this. Sometimes we get caught up in details. I just really appreciate the opportunity to give some feedback. And, you know, if the feedback ultimately doesn't end up in there, I still feel much better that we're included because this hasn't been the way it's worked in the past. So thank you very much.
There's been some pretty nasty things that have gone on downtown, you know, historically, so sometimes people respond to like, oh God, you know, that's why, there's just messes, big messes throughout the years.
Well, I think everything that you guys have requested, probably should go in here. I'll review again why we put the 2-bedroom maximum on there, but that could have been one or two things. It could have been the upper story dwelling requirement, and because we mirrored it, that could have been where that came from. If it's in Claire's, I'll explain it to you when I send it back, and then, but I think, what you guys have requested isn't outrageous, so I probably will be including them and then taking them to the planning commission and just saying, hey, these are the recommendations from the DDA, and then I'll send it back to you guys with whatever we call it. Luckily, as much as I want to do it, as quickly as possible with only having 10 people, it kind of killed it. We had a brief window there to get these passed, and unfortunately, I think that's passed. So, but I will be incorporating it and send it back out, and I just want to make sure that I have these in here one more time. So you guys wanted to look at no dwelling unit shall exceed the two bedrooms to say basically no maximum of 2 bedrooms, and they still have to be the 500 square foot because that's D minimum floor area. So you basically allow it to, as long as you're meeting the minimum of 500 square feet, you can have as many as you can fit in there.
I thought it was that two bedrooms in the minimum 500. If you went over them, you could have.
So you want a smaller square foot than the 500?
No.
The other one.
So that you don't, if you're gonna have 3 bedrooms, you're not trying to.
You can't put 3 bedrooms in 500 square feet, you can only put 2 bedrooms. If it's larger than 500 square feet, then bedrooms are open to discussion.
I got a suggestion. Why don't you make a minimum why don't we make a more minimum core living area, eliminate minimum square footage? Make a minimum core living area square footage, make a minimum square footage for bedrooms. Takes care of the whole issue.
You probably,
Otherwise, you could run into a situation where someone says 30-foot bedrooms, 40-foot bedrooms, and crams 15 of them in, like that, saying. Like makes sense.
Doesn't building code have a minimum square footage for bedrooms anyway?
It has an access requirement. I don't know about that. Check with the building inspector to ensure that there's a minimum, but I mean, you can set an additional minimum square footage or, along with the core living area, kind of what a lot of communities do, especially with like minimum wall lengths and that sort of thing.
Really, with building code, I think you only have to have one exit or one door between you and an exit. So you could literally line a wall with 1 bedroom doors that walk out to a patio or something like that.
I thought there was a minimum square footage. But anyway, I think your suggestion.
Yeah, just eliminate minimum square footage.
Okay, so that was the first one, and then also adding to lower story access, or lower story accessory, the sub-level to be included with it. Is that correct?
Why don't you, just 2 separate definitions.
Right.
Street level and lower level.
Yeah.
Street level and sub level.
I'm just trying to make sure I have both things. So that was it, though, right?
Maybe sub-levels, because there's some buildings that have 2 sub-levels.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Moving on to new business.
I just got, this company sent me an email about some material, a phone call. This also was too good to be true.
yeah, but it's okay, I just got that.
Cover all the costs of installation, obviously, some fees somehow. I just, is it something that the DDA would be interested in pursuing? Putting in some of those charging stations in the downtown, if so, I would then take it to council to see how they would.
Who pays for electricity? That's a good question.
This is like Park Mobile, right? So you approach it
Okay, so the consumer pays for the.
Yeah, there's no cost to the city that I saw.
Yep, that'll be perfect. Yeah, you
And I know I
didn't
looked at
visit
things
any
a couple
states.
years ago, when consumers power, it was cost prohibitive. So I've not heard of any other company doing something similar. One of the things is, that, if it would put us on the map, because I understand they have maps out there of where the charging stations are, and they bring a different setting.
Okay, sounds good, Connie. Take care.
I had a discussion
All right, bye.
about this, and so it didn't cost me much. I put it in my parking lot. So it didn't get aggressive that way. We had it heard for sure.
Exactly, so, if they're absent any opposition, I'll put it on the council work session probably in September, and ask this representative to come up and talk a little bit more about it.
I mean, I immediately go into the details of, where, what, because you're essentially taking parking spaces out of the mix, allocated to this. Who's enforcing that parking such that if someone's not using it for the intended purpose, who's enforcing that? There's a lot of details. In principle, this is great, and we should know more, so that all makes sense. But I think there are a lot of details that cause me
Is it
concern.
city parking? Like, isn't there the lots?
It would be, in my mind, we would have it in city park. I mean, that's all, only thing with authorize, Jay wanted to do something himself, that's fine.
Right.
But I want to make sure
Should be
that,
River Street, I mean, that would be, if you want visibility and really being out there, having certain spots on River Street would be a really great way of publicizing that, but there are consequences.
and we can drill down into the details. My initial thought was I wanted to make sure there was no opposition at the DDA level, and then get it in front of council. If there's no opposition there, then we can drill down into the details of locations, how many, signage, all that stuff.
And even to that point is, I believe, I don't have a copy of our TIP plan here, but that is actually a line item in our TIP plan. It's for the charging infrastructure, so.
I have a lot of questions about it, but I am not in favor of it. My only suggestion with that would be that, we look, at least consider other companies.
Right, and I'm not aware of any other.
And I talked to a friend of mine who's in the industry, and he also mentioned consumers, so just, like I said, it's no cost to us, but consider,
What little I know, 2 years ago when I was working with consumers, it was a cost.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't free.
So we're gonna put free gas pumps downtown too, right?
You get it through zoning. You think McCarthy do that?
Oh, sure. Buried tanks downtown. Yeah.
Price in there already.
Yeah. Anything else on that, Pat? No, that's it, thank you. Ken?
At my first meeting, I indicated I'd be willing to reach out to people who were part of Spark and just see where they were with their plans. Only one person responded, and that was Joanne Snay. She sent me an email. I have not reached out to her since she sent the email, but what she said was she was planning on starting some classes in July. I haven't talked to her about that. She said opening a studio doesn't make sense financially, especially with operation restricted to half capacity. She'd eventually like to open a location and move forward with original plans. Optimistically shooting for late fall or winter, but everything just depends on the COVID environment. Her ask in the email was if the DDA would give her an extension to claim the prize money. So I'll reach back out to her and follow up and see where she is. But do we have a response to her on the funding that she earned through Spark? Or what do we have to do to address that?
I'm familiar with all that.
So the monies that she was awarded, she hasn't taken possession of right now, she's asking for an extension on possession.
I think given the circumstances of the world today, an extension is in order now. And I don't know what all the caveats were that went along with the award. I have no idea.
those are all things we can do. So I would be very supportive of if she's able to follow through on that. I'll decide on that.
I think it's exciting that she's still interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll reach out to her and tell her that we discussed it and we'll remain flexible with her to understand the current environment. And I'll also reach back out to the other people that were finalists in Spark and see where they stand, reach out, press them, and see what I can get. I'll fill everybody in when I hear.
Thanks for working on that. Anything else, Ken?
Nope, that's it.
I just had one addition, DDA events. The chairperson of the Hops and Props Committee, who happens to be my wife, Carrie, wants to make an official announcement that it is no longer taking place this year. I wanted to just bring that to the board. There was a little bit of discontent, mostly through email, with how the Swago event being canceled at a city council meeting, but it being a DDA event, and I got some emails in regards to that. And I had, I read about it in the newspaper as well, so I was as surprised that at least we weren't included as part of that conversation initially, or the Swago committee. So just wanted to make that comment. Those are kind of our two signature people.
So I just want to, in my experience on the board, I've never, ever, ever seen or heard a presentation from the Sligo committee to this board. So I've always felt like they're out there, but, we as a board have no connection with them. So maybe that is something that they need to be a little bit more involved with us, or have some committee reports, or, we got some information on occasion. At one time, our board chair was on that committee, but there was really I didn't feel any connection with that.
I agree. I think in the past, because Rachel chaired that, we probably felt that connection. But with Kendra, in fairness, she hasn't been asked either. So
Right. So it would be good to bring it back together. I don't even think, I didn't, like, some of the monies that they raised and stuff, they kept those, like, separate, didn't they? The money always got kind of weird.
They had always requested that, and
Yeah.
we never.
New line or
Or
what's
line,
going.
right.
Yeah, so I think if there is room for a better connection.
And hopefully with the move to the chamber, there's certainly not a lot of discussion in regards to events and how to better integrate and communicate all the stuff you're suggesting as well. So that's all I have on that. Any public comment? No. Any other comments from board members?
I have a number of updates just to keep the board in the loop. Last night, first of all, I hope everybody's aware that the boathouse has been purchased by Ted Cosano.
I think close on.
I don't know where they are with that yet, but Ted Fricano, and he's a very good restaurateur from the Frankie Spring Lake area. He has the Fricano place on Muskegon Lake, and he has Ted's in Spring Lake, and we've been courting him as a community for over 3 years. And so he's going to buy it. He's going to turn it into something really nice. He made his presentation last night at council was very, very passionate. You could feel his passion for his industry as well as this community. His vision is to work with the city to actually buy more property around there, so we can, number one, expand his deck, and also put in a second lower deck at a lower level, something along what the Elks had in mind. And then have connectivity to the Riverwalk. So you come right off the Riverwalk into his facility, and possibly up on the River Street. He wants to be, he wants to mesh with the marina. I'm really excited about his interest in connectivity to the Riverwalk, because that might set something up going further down where, whatever the taxes are currently for up to 12 years, and we wouldn't capture any of those improvements, the values. But after 12 years, then if it's valued at $1 million, so we start collecting. So it's, I think it's kind of sick.
The comment you made last night on that is, you said one of the steps is to create an Oak district.
Right.
Would we consider maybe thinking strategically and doing more than just the footprint of that building to encourage others?
I just don't know how many other,
And if you have a district, does everything in that district have to qualify, or is the district just going to give you the area, and then they still have to have further qualifications?
the first step is you have the district, and then each property is viewed on its own merit.
I would encourage us looking at a district that really enables that redevelopment activity in the downtown in a way that's more than just this one property.
Okay. Then I was in a meeting earlier this week with the college president. They're looking at occupancy sometime in November, he hopes early November. So that'll be a great thing. And
It's moving.
it is moving, there's no doubt. The lighting buildings downtown, Jeff Gordon is, I connected Safe Build, which does our building official services, with the city attorney. And the city attorney is going to FOIA the state to get written proof that there are valid building permits. They won't, to this point, it's just been verbal. And I, for one, don't trust the state on verbal. So if there's no valid building permits, then we can enforce the law. So that's, hopefully they'll respond to us in a timely fashion. And then CL Development and Blue River Holdings that are working on that gateway project in the corner, they were in town, or CL was in town most of last week, talking with a number of different people. They're looking at rolling this out at the council workshop in September to talk about their vision, have some renderings and what they want to do. So, I encourage you that, because we are invested in it, to come to that meeting if you want to learn more about it. But it's pretty exciting.
What's that mean?
That would be the second Tuesday of September. And most likely will be a Wednesday. And then finally, and I mentioned it before, if Kyle and Hammer can get together with that, how do we approve invoices so we can get them paid? Because there's some work that we've taken on behalf of the DDA, and now the vendors are all over that, all getting paid. So if we can just get that taken care of, it would be appreciated. That's all I have.
If I could just add two things on the Gateway project, just as it relates to our involvement, actually I guess three. One is, and I'm making assumptions, but technically we have out there a letter of support for that project that says we would consider locating offices in part of their project. That probably doesn't make sense anymore with the chamber's involvement and they're being located in a different important project. But we still do have that out there, and at some point we probably maybe asked about to formally say that we no longer intend to do it. Two, as part of our TIF plan, I think there's $150,000 planned to spruce up that intersection, which makes sense that we potentially can figure out how we could help do things that also, while they're doing their project, could help or become part of their project, et cetera. And then the third is, and I've already reached out to Tyler on this, is as it relates to the garbage corrals, and the change in the trash pickup of River Street. We had originally hoped that we could maybe acquire the park parcel that didn't facilitate, I've reached out and Tyler, we're kind of talking about this, is incorporating that into their site plan, that there at least be on the far end, something that's very close to River Street, that is a location for heritage. Goes to some of the, one of the locations that are being developed right now is reasonably close, but the other is a bit of a hike. So those are all things that kind of tie into that project as well. Speaking of dumpsters and garbage, do you have an update on where things are on that, as far as the ordinance and
Yeah,
other
we
things?
had a meeting this week, I think it was this week, maybe last week, with several staff members of the city attorney. We have a draft ordinance that we're critiquing right now. So that would be
Why did that not happen prior to construction of the corrals?
It was, well, a couple things. Mostly it was a timing issue because we were rolling out our whole new concept citywide. And I mean, that just took all of our efforts for staff to make sure we had that. We were focusing solely on that. We knew the dumpsters weren't, or I should say, the corrals were a little bit out at that time. And we just said when they're closer to completion, we'll focus on it. So,
But if that ordinance doesn't pass, is the DDA still on the hook to pay for the corrals that wouldn't be used?
well, I don't know that answer, but the ordinance is not going to pay. It's that was a recommendation from that ad hoc rubbish committee, and DDA's already been, vocal about repair, so that's not going to pay.
I wouldn't be opposed to those dumpsters being put in those corrals prior to the ordinance passing.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Any other, excuse me, board member comments?
I do appreciate some of the cleanup that's been happening on the boardwalk.
Good. It costs us a lot of money to get that truck out.
Yeah.
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 It's embarrassing, rather than truck, so that is.
Yeah, it's good to know that it's hollow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we're looking at how are we gonna ensure the integrity of the rest of the river along. Maybe some, we have around penetrating somewhere or something. Yeah, it just causes some concern.
I think
So that's what happened back there.
the small, like one-ton dump truck.
Yeah, that we take up and down there, that section had been eroded.
Like underlined.
Yeah, I
Okay.
saw, as I didn't, but the truck had already wasn't there, so I didn't see what caused it. I didn't know the issues.
Yeah, so.
My suspicion is as we start pulling up deck boards, that we might find some interesting things.
Well, that board's not our biggest problem, it's where we get kind of,
Yeah.
that's our biggest concern.
And you can see it shifting
Oh,
in some of those places. But I just wondered too, as I walk down, and I mean, great, appreciate that they're going to take care of some of that. Are there plans, or is there a master plan, or there are pieces, especially by, past Taco about it, where that insurance company is on the back, that wall is starting to erode and stuff? Are there plans, like, will we replace this section, or will we look
That's
at-
part of our capital improvement plan, that goes on years of different projects, coming down to, up into the end, it's on the radar.
And how about on, I don't, it's, yeah, how about the, across from the road, that little park that's down
Oh,
there?
that's the North Riverfront Park and Veterans Park. We put in a grant to the trust fund, our trust fund, we're still waiting on that. And the city bonded for, I believe, about $6 million. Part of that bonding was the match for the grant, so we're just waiting to hear from them. And it's gonna be a total review.
Yeah, it's a little dangerous.
Well, it's either we get the grant or close it down.
Maybe that needs to be where it's out there, not cancel.
Just one final thing, this is an exciting time to be in Manistee, and, for, affiliated with the DDA, but we've got the college project going on, we got, for free to start the footings of concrete work, if he wants to get that going yet this month. So, but this is just a neat time to be in this city.